Hey everyone, Stuart with Franklin Hill Ventures. This is my weekly What Sold video where I break down my sales across multiple platforms and share my top flips of the week. This week I sold 20 items online and those sales were across eBay, Etsy, Poshmark, the Whatnot Marketplace, and drumroll please, even Depop came through with the sale. I know I was completely blown away. Anyway, those sales brought in just over $680 in revenue and about $380 in profits, so around a 55% profit margin. But when it came to my top 10 most profitable sales, only eBay and Etsy made the cut this week. Which one of those platforms came out on top? You'll have to stay tuned to find out. This countdown features books, artwork, collectibles, with books and artwork leading the way. So let's jump right into number 10. Coming in at number 10 is a timely one with football season just starting. It's a Denver Broncos cookbook from 1988, and this isn't your everyday cookbook. It's filled with recipes contributed by player wives, coaches, front office staff, and even some of the players themselves, like John Elway. I picked this up for $3 along the world's longest yard sale, and it sold on Etsy for $21, leaving me with a profit of around $13. Even though they're not usually big money items, cookbooks are definitely a bolo for me. They can always be picked up cheap or often be picked up cheap. They're easy to package and ship, and there's a lot of people out there who love to collect them. Coming in at number 9 is a vintage John Denver concert program from 1982. I think that's the year I started high school. This one sold on Etsy and headed out to Washington State. I originally picked this one up from a Whatnot show for $7, and even with that higher buy in, I was still able to make a profit of around $14. I do hate that I never got to see John Denver in concert. One of my great memories is going on vacation to Montreat, North Carolina, and they had a John Denver 8 track, and I remember we would just play that, my brothers and I, all the time. Especially liked Rocky Mountain High and The Eagle and the Hawk. In any case, I was fortunate enough though to see Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys 3 times, which was incredible because he's my favorite artist. And how about you? What's the best concert you've ever been to? Drop your answer down in the comments. I'd love to know who everybody's favorite bands are and who you've seen in concert. At number 8 is a vintage made in Japan Lefton figurine of a child holding a dog. I picked this one up during a house clean out I did, which for me is always a great way to source these kinds of unique pieces that a lot of times you don't find these at your average thrift store. I get these opportunities through relationships I've built over the years of doing this. I always hand my business cards out at yard sales, estate sales, really anywhere that I can find somebody to take one. In any case, that's led to me getting phone calls to go look at stuff, and then you treat people right, they'll give your name to other people. So getting your name out there and building these relationships can be a very important part of sourcing. In any case, this sold on Etsy for $25, and after cost, I made a profit of around $15. I have found that left-in pieces are pretty popular with collectors, especially the older made in Japan ones. So if I see them, I always grab them if the price is right. At number 7 is a cut glass perfume bottle that I sold on Etsy for $21. And to be honest, I don't really know where this one came from originally. I found it in one of my money mountains out in my garage. Some people call them a death pile. But anyway, during one of my recent garage cleanouts, I found this in a box and it'd probably been sitting out there for a while. And I couldn't remember exactly where I got it or how much I paid for it. So because of that, I had to put a $0 cost of goods sold on it, which made my profit number look better and kicked it into the top 10 here. But of course, that also means that I'll have to pay a little more in income taxes on this particular item. Uh, One thing I'll say is I've gotten a lot better about processing items in a timely manner, but this was a reminder of why that's so important. Does anybody else have issues with finding stuff in their garage or wherever your death pile or money mountain might be and then not remembering where it came from? Hey, drop your stories down in the comments. At number 6 is a souvenir Hawaiian Islands metal trinket dish, and I picked this up at an estate sale for just $1, and it sold on, you guessed it, so far I think every sale's been on this platform, sold on Etsy for $24, leaving me with a profit of around $17. And this one went off to Wisconsin, which I guess it was a lot cheaper for them to buy this trinket dish than to pay for an actual Hawaiian vacation. In any case, I've talked before about my love for collectible state plates, the plates with landmarks, any of those types of souvenirs, and this one fit perfectly into that lane. They're fun to sell for me, pretty inexpensive to source. Usually I can get them for $1 or two, and they always eventually seem to find a buyer. So we've now reached the halfway point in the countdown. We've already seen a mix of books, artwork, and collectibles, and all the bigger sales are still ahead. And just as a reminder to give you the big picture, I had 20 online sales this week for around $680 in revenue, $380 in profit. So just about a 55% margin. And then on top of that, I did not mention this at the beginning. My booths had a really strong week, bringing in just over $869 in sales. And I mentioned I had one consignment sale in my online sales. I actually had a total of 4 consignment sales between onlines and booths. And just as a reminder, if you've never tried consignment, it can be a great way to expand your inventory and generate sales without putting up any money out of pocket. We have plenty more flips to cover, so let's jump right into the top 5. At number 5 is a really cool piece of history tied to Oak Ridge, which is just right down the road from where we live here in Knoxville, and the U.S. Atomic Energy Program. It's a manual issued by the Clinton Engineer Works, and it's titled Electrical Equipment for Tanks and Magnets, and it originally came out of the Y-12 Technical Library. The Y-12 plant, for those who don't know, is in Oak Ridge, and it was originally part of the Manhattan Project during World War II, and later became a key site for uranium enrichment and nuclear research, and still in use today. I picked this up at a Knoxville yard sale for just $2 and sold it on eBay, so first non Etsy sale, for $30, leaving me with a profit of around $18. And not surprisingly, it ended up being shipped right back to a Knoxville address, so this piece of local history stayed local. I'm just curious, have you ever found an item that's tied to your hometown's history? If so, tell us the story in the comments. Moving on to number 4, we stay on eBay, and once again, it's a book. And this one is the 1971 edition of Tennessee Christians by Herman A. Norton. And this book explores the history of the Disciples of Christ Christian Church in Tennessee, and this particular copy happened to be signed by the author. I picked this up for $2 at my favorite estate sale company and ended up selling it for $39, leaving me with a profit of around $23. And as I've said before in these videos, religion sells. At number 3 is a vintage 1946 Swedish book with the title Det Hyundai 1896. I'm sure I butchered that pronunciation. So in any case, the title translates to It Happened in 1896, and it's full of great illustrations depicting late 1800s Swedish history. This was another Whatnot auction pickup. I bought it during a show for $25 and later sold it on Etsy for $68, which left me with a profit of around $34. This one shipped off to Washington State, which was the second sale of the week headed that way. Just real quick, in total, I shipped items out to 10 different states this week. California led the way with 4 sales. Montana, Washington, and Tennessee each had 2. So if you take Tennessee out of the equation, most of my stuff went west of the Mississippi this week. I do love seeing my items going all over the country and even across the world. I think last year I sold to all 50 states and at least 6 or 8 foreign countries. So at number 2, we have an absolute banger, and yes, it happens to be another book, and this one's a 1985 paperback titled Fresh Hip Hop Don't Stop Subculture Guide, and it dives into the music, fashion, and dance of hip hop in the mid 1980s with tons of photos, details, and stories on some of the groundbreaking hip hop acts of the time, such as Grandmaster Flash, Afrika Bambaataa, and the Soul Sonic Force, and Run DMC. Now, this happened to be the year I graduated high school in 1985, so I definitely remember when hip hop was starting to become mainstream. I picked this up at the thrift shop for just $1.50, and to be honest, I saw it, I took it, I didn't do any comps in the thrift shop itself. I knew it would sell for more than $1.50 because any hip hop stuff sells pretty well, whether it's t-shirts, records, books. But when I got home and started comping, I thought, this could be a really good sale. And it ended up selling on eBay for $102. And after shipping and fees, that left me with around a $70 profit. Just books tied to music culture can be huge winners, as this one was. And this particular one shows exactly why I always check the book section when I'm outsourcing, whether that's at thrift shops, yard sales, or estate sales. Finishing strong at number one is this piece of double-sided folk art on salvage wood by Eric Legg. And I Googled Mr. Legg, and this is what it said. It said Eric Legg is a self-taught artist originally from Illinois, but now creating in the North Georgia mountains. Legg's spiritually inspired paintings, often of landscapes, smiling faces, churches, and vibrant natural scenes, are included in collections like the High Museum of Art and carry a quote sense of peace and happiness and joy. And so I picked this little gem up at a whatnot auction. So I think that's the third thing in my top 10 that came from a whatnot auction. So definitely a good place to source if you're not doing it there. But I paid $20 for this and sold it on eBay for $160. And after fees, shipping, and I did pay insurance on this shipping since it was $160, I had a profit of just about $100. Now, just to be honest, selling artwork like this online is rare for me since I usually keep pieces of artwork local to my booth, but every once in a while I will sell smaller pieces like this online. So before I wrap up, I've got to share my worst sell of the week, and this one goes a way back. It's a metal elephant figurine that had been sitting in my inventory since November of 2021. And I'd recently lowered the price just to try to get it to move. I've been making a conscious effort to take things that are more than, X number of years old and lower the price so I can get them out of my inventory. So in any case, this one finally sold last week on Poshmark for $12. And on paper, it looks like I lost about 25 cents after fees. But the reality is the $7 I originally spent for this was nearly 4 years ago. So from a cash flow standpoint, it was really like pocketing $6 of profit today. And sometimes you just have to take a loss to clear out some older inventory and move on. That could be stuff that, you shouldn't have ever bought to begin with, or maybe when you bought it, it was in style and now it's not. But in any case, it's okay to take a loss occasionally. And that wraps up this week's countdown. So just to recap, I had 20 online sales across eBay, Etsy, Poshmark, Whatnot Marketplace, and even Depop came through this week for me. And those totaled about $686 in revenue with $380 in profit, giving me around a 55% margin. Add to that a really strong week at the booth with over $869 in sales. And overall, it was a pretty solid week. Uh, I do think it's weeks like this, or really any week, it shows how important it is to diversify across platforms, mix in boost sales. Don't overlook things like consignment sales. Even if you don't have boosts, you can diversify across platforms. As I mentioned before, I use List Perfectly to help me do that. If you're interested in trying List Perfectly, you can look in the show notes. There's a link there for 30% off your first month. And finally, thanks again to everyone who watched last week's episode. I picked up new subscribers, saw great engagement, and I really, really appreciate the support. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss next week's countdown. And let me know in the comments, what was your best flip of the week, or maybe your lowest profit flip of the week? I'd love to hear about it.